Hello and welcome. Today I'll be telling you a bit about the Superhero DEX and how to add liquidity for your preferred tokens. Initially, I will just give you a quick intro. What is a DEX? Why do we need a DEX? Then we will talk a bit about the math behind the DEX, and we're gonna go into swaps and adding and removing liquidity and how you would theoretically do it and what actually happens there. And then we're gonna close the session with a demo, a live demo. Hopefully that works out all well. To explore the existing UI for the DEX and see how you can provide liquidity and do swaps for yourself. So what is the problem that we're trying to solve with the DEX? Basically, the idea is that you have two items that you want to trade fairly, and to trade it fairly, you need to determine a price and enable the swaps or the exchange to be happening. And if I want to trade an apple to a banana, it's really hard to figure out how many apples are worth how many bananas. And the system that is commonly used for that is similar to the stuff that also centralized exchange formats use. Is called an order book system. And what you can do there is you can submit orders to either buy or sell something at a certain price. And what then happens is once there is a match between someone selling something and someone buying something at a certain price or variations, these people are then matched and they can then both execute their transaction. So the person selling something can send the goods or the items to the person buying something, and the person buying something sends back the payment in form of items or tokens or whatever back to the person that sells something. And this order book system works well if you have a large group of people that are willing to wait a bit on their orders being executed, and most importantly, you have a central entity that controls the order book for you and does that on a trust basis, basically. And this is already like tying a bit into the problems that exist with the central order book format, because when you are submitting these orders, you have to make sure that you know like roughly what the price range is going to be, and you also have to be a bit lucky so that your orders will be fulfilled eventually. And it might take like a minute, it might take an hour, it might take a day, and it might never happen, depending on how the price develops and what changes. And maintaining these giant order books then, because people will probably submit orders for all price ranges if they're interested in a commodity, then this becomes a very tough thing to replicate in the decentralized world, where we want to decentralize the trust a bit, and we would do it over a smart contract. It means that the smart contract needs to hold a lot of data. People need to come in all the time by changing their orders to adjust to a new price or something like this. And that just makes like burns a lot of gas and means that the contract has to store a giant state. So to solve this, they came up, or some people came up with a system that we now know as decentralized exchanges. Uniswap is one instance of that, and one example. And the idea of Uniswap is that there's liquidity providers, and then there's people doing swaps, and that's what we base the Superhero DEX on as well. It's quite close to the original Uniswap implementation, and you are if you already know the Uniswap system, the next minutes are not going to be super interesting for you. But I want to get everyone on the same page before we go a bit deeper into the system. So let's discuss what is the Superhero DEX. And at its core, it's something that is called an automated market maker, meaning it can completely on its own determine the price for a certain commodity pair. So for example, if I have here on the right side, you see a screenshot from the application. We have Æternity tokens and we have retrue tokens, and the system tells me that one retrue token is 0.0038 blah 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 Æternity coins. And with this determination, it allows me to do instant click and buy orders. So I can just punch in the numbers, click swap, and the tokens will be swapped immediately. And I don't have to fully go back and build a whole order system, order book system. It all happens within the contract, and it all happens basically immediately. So how does it work on a technical level? There is a pool contract here. You can see it illustrated as pink, the pink rectangle, and it contains two reserves. So liquidity reserves. Here in this case, from a yellow token and a green token. And when Alice wants to do a swap, it will send some green tokens to the contract, and they will receive some yellow tokens as a payment or like compensation, basically. And the same is obviously possible in reverse. So there, if Bob would send some yellow tokens, they would receive some green tokens. And when you're using the DEX, it's a bit more complicated. There's one more contract involved, the router contract, there's a UI, there's a backend. So all of these play their role, but this is like in the most fundamental level, this is how it works. And now the question arises, how does the contract know how much to send back, basically? So what is the price? Assuming I'm sending 5 green tokens, how much yellow tokens will I get back? And the core fundamental principle that lies beneath all of this is the so-called constant function. And the constant function is a multiplication of the two reserves that we have. So here in this case, we have reserve A and reserve B. And they should equal a constant. Here in this case, they equal 4, but basically you can punch in any number here and it will work. And to illustrate this a bit visually, I've stolen this beautiful math slides from Dan Robinson from the Berkeley University. And here what you can see in this graph, the y-axis is the dollar reserve, so the US dollar here in this case, probably some sort of a stable coin or wrapped US dollars or something like this. And on the x-axis, you can see the reserves of our other asset, which in this case is Æternity. And you can see that we're starting with one Æternity token, and we have 4 US dollars in our pool. And when we draw in the constant function, we can see that we get this nice curve, and our point where we are at the moment lies perfectly on that. That's perfectly on that curve. So now take the case Alice sends in some AE. Here in this case, she sends in 3 AE. How much do we send back to her? And given that we always have to be on a constant function, we can just take the point that we're at now and try to bring it back to the constant function by removing as much US dollars as we need to get back to the constant function. So when we trace that down, we will see that here in this case, we would send out 3 US dollars to get back to the curve. Meaning our new liquidity would then end up being 1 US dollars and 4 AEs in the pool. And this transaction, so like going from the point of the top left to the point on the bottom right, obviously comes with a certain ratio. And determining that ratio is the the ratio itself is called the execution price, and to determine it, we basically just draw a straight line through the 2 points, and then we take the slope of the line, and this will give us the price of the execution. Here in this case, the price of the execution was 1. We can obviously toy with it a bit, so if we put in a bit more, if we put in a bit more here AE tokens, we would get a bit more US dollars back, or if we put in a bit less, so for example here we put in 0.1 AE tokens, we would get 0.41 tokens back, and you can play with this, but this is the image that you should remember, because this is the most common case. So what will most likely happen when you're doing a swap, you're doing these like tiny steps on this curve, so the impact of your the price impact of your swap will most likely usually be very small, and should be very small, because otherwise it can get a bit confusing. But what I say is that basically when we are on a certain point, we then do a transaction and we land in a new point, we have always a fixed price that we start at, and that is like the initial price that we communicate to a customer as well. And to get that, we can simply take the tangent at that point, and then also look at the slope again. And so here in this case, we started out with a price of 4, meaning that 1 AE costed 4 US dollars, and we ended at a price of 0.25, meaning 1 AE now costs 0.25 US dollars. And this always gives you an indication of if I'm going more in one direction. So for example, if we go back to the very small swap that we did here, you can see that we did a small step, and the price of the execution is 3.5, and our new price is probably around like 3.5-ish as well. And so then this is the new price that we would quote later on to new customers. Okay, so this concludes the math section. I hope you've understood the basic principles. Please remember like the constant curve and us being on there, and we're always falling back on it. And this is like the core principle of how the math behind the DEX works. And when we're using it, for example, to do a swap here, then the following happens. So consider a trader on the top left. They input 3 tokens here, token A in this case, and there is a small fee attached to that. I'll get to that in a second, but basically just consider it add-on to the input tokens. And we then take this information and we go down the slope a bit, just like we learned, and we determine how much should go out. And here we start the pool at 1200 and 400, and we end the pool at 1203.03 and 399, because we need to output 1 token to basically stay on the curve. And you can see that the price changed a little bit, so now instead of 3 to quote-unquote 1, it's now 3.01 a token A for a token B. And then we send that back. And when we're providing liquidity, we're coming back to the pool contract. So I like before we got into the math section, I did this basic introduction of like, hey, the pool contract is this pink rectangle, and what you will see here is it does a bit more than just hold the two token reserves, because when we're providing liquidity, what we want to do is we want to deposit both assets, so the green and the yellow, into the pool contract, and it should be in the same ratio that already exists. And then the pool contract will mint back some tokens based on the amount that we provided. And so, I don't know, let's say there is already a pool that has a total liquidity of 50 tokens, and I'm adding in another 25 of green and another 25 of yellow, the total liquidity of the pool would be now 50 tokens. And this means that I then would end up getting a 50% share of the pool. And this is illustrated by the pool minting exactly how many tokens, how it already like passed out. So you don't need to worry about the total amount of this. So say, I don't know, there is already one token, like one liquidity token out there, and then it just mints another one. Then there's two liquidity tokens, and since I'm holding one, I'm holding 50% of the share. And this liquidity token then comes in handy when you're removing liquidity because it's your proof of ownership. And what you're doing then is you're sending in, when you want to retrieve your liquidity that you provided, you send the pool contract your liquidity tokens to burn them up, and the pool contract then will hand you back 50% of whatever is currently in the pool, or however, if more people contributed liquidity in the meantime, your share of the pool may have shrunk. So at the time that you're putting the money, you're returning your liquidity tokens, your pool share will be determined, and X% of the pool liquidity will then be paid out back to you. And this is also the point where you get paid for providing the liquidity. Because why would you do it? Every pool collects a 0.3% fee for all swap transactions that run through the pool. And obviously this over time accumulates quite a bit of money. And when you are then retrieving your liquidity, the payout will happen because the total liquidity has increased without anyone providing extra liquidity, meaning your shares will not be diluted by this, and your shares will then just like increase in value. Obviously, there are some risks involved, so don't just like go in there blindly investing money. Read up about impermanent loss and other issues with the DEX, just so that you're aware. And yeah, with this, we're gonna go ahead and jump into our demo. So for the demo, we will take a look at the live version of our app. You can find it at app.dex.superhero.com, as you see here in the title. And when you first land, you will see this a bit empty mask here. And what we will do is we will do some swaps, and then we will also take a look at the liquidity stuff. In the beginning, if you're interested, there's a lot of settings that you can change, the language, and obviously check out the sources and leave us some feedback if you want to. So starting out, you can see that I have the Superhero wallet installed here. So this is the pop-up, and you can see I've already done some swaps in the past. So we're going to start out with connecting to our Superhero wallet. This should happen quite quickly. We can see that it is detected that my wallet is running on mainnet. This is the address, and this is the amount of AE that I currently own. And the swap interface is the default interface here, and I can just go in and select the token that I want to swap. You see that we have a couple of tokens shortlisted here, so these will provide some like a starting point for you to experiment with. But we have a full list of tokens that are currently available on the Æternity mainnet chain. So we have 391 tokens. You can enable this by just clicking this button. And obviously there's the option to add custom tokens. So if you only want your token in there or the token of a friend, feel free to just put the token address here, and our system will then try to fetch the meter information from this contract. But for now, we're gonna stick with the basic version. So first, I'm gonna select AE here, and for the second one, I'm gonna select the vTrue token, and we can see that I have a balance of 10 AE and 0 V2 tokens. And the price is already, as we've seen in the previous presentation, calculated from the pool. So we asked the pool, what is the current price? And this is the output, basically. And so now I'm going to swap 0.5 AE for some V2 tokens. You can see that this is automatically calculated. I just need to click the swap button. And since I'm probably not the only one doing swaps at this time, there is a certain range. And this is what the slippage is all about, basically. This means that when I'm putting in 0.5 AE tokens plus the fee, you can see that I will roughly get 131, but the output is estimated, and you will receive at least 124 V2 tokens, or the transaction will be reverted. So this is the price that I'm currently. This 5% is the difference here. So this is the range that we're working with, and my price impact that I'm having at the moment is very small. Yeah, we also show again here, this is the minimum received, and then I can confirm the swap. Here it asks me to sign up on the contract call. You see that I'm swapping AE to V2 tokens. This is the minimum received, and I can obviously look up more details in the transaction. And then I'm confirming the transaction, and here the transaction was successfully submitted, and you can see here that I did the swap. So now my balance is 0.5 AE lower, and I have 131 V2 tokens. Obviously, as I've shown you before, we can do the same thing in reverse. So if I say, I don't know, I want to swap all my V2 tokens that I just bought back, there's one additional steps. You need to allow the DEX to act on your behalf when working with the V2 tokens. So basically, you have to do two transactions. The first one is to tell the V2 token contract it's okay, the DEX can take these 131 that I have in my current balance and perform an action with it. And you see that I'm not getting quite the exact amount back. And this is mostly because of the fee, and also because obviously the price changes a tiny bit. There is always a bit of loss. Exactly. So that's what I'm putting in. I'm confirming it. And you see here, I have successfully approved it. Now it tells me to swap. Here you can see the numbers again, the slippage, and again here the output is estimated. I'll receive at least 0.47 AE. Confirming the swap again, and ta-da! I now have almost all of my AE back. I obviously paid the fee twice, so I'm not quite there, and that's the part of the swap. So now we're going to talk a bit about adding the liquidity. So here I'm on the pool page. You can see that I just clicked over here. And when I'm adding liquidity, it prompts me with the two tokens that I want to add liquidity for. So here let's use AE and the V2 token that we just bought. And I'm going to go ahead and add the maximum of the V2 tokens, which is almost 1 AE. You can see here, obviously, it diverges a bit because we already paid the fee. And so first step here, again, I need to approve the tokens. So you can see it will create a transaction for me that I then need to approve. So I just approved it, and now I can click the supply button. This means that both of these tokens will be deducted from my account, and I will get some pool shares. Here in this case, it's a very small amount, but I will be part of the pool. So I'll get 16 AEV2 pool tokens back. So I'm confirming this, I'm signing the transaction, and I successfully provided liquidity. So if I go back now, I can see here, this is the liquidity that I provided. Looks like I already provided some liquidity in the past, which is why this is a bit higher. And I have a total of 23 tokens. And so now I can go ahead and add more if I want to, or I could go ahead and remove it. So say I remove all the tokens and AE that I have in there. I obviously, again, first need to approve the contract to use to basically run the burn transaction. And once the approval is through, I can click the remove button and remove the tokens. And I'll submit the transaction. Gonna wait for confirmation. There we go. And now I don't have any liquidity anymore. Okay, so that concludes the live session. I hope you learned a bit about the DEX today. You saw how to use it, and I'm hoping you come in and do some swaps and contribute some liquidity. I'm also always available in the forums, in Discord, in Telegram. So feel free to hit me up if you have any questions or comments. And feel free to also use the feedback form or the GitHub issues to provide some additional information or issues regarding the DEX. Thanks a lot.